I thought the screaming in D block was just wind echoing through the cells, until I checked every door, every corridor, every lock, and realized the sound was coming from a cell that hadn't been opened in years. You're listening to True Haunting Log, where real stories don't just stay in one place, they wait. And if you've experienced something you can't explain, send your story to truehauntinglog@gmail.com. Story 1. The Ghost, Prisoners of Alcatraz. I took the overnight maintenance security contract on Alcatraz Island because it paid well and came with the kind of isolation I thought I needed. A clean break from everything on the mainland. But no one tells you that isolation in a place like that doesn't clear your head. It fills it with things that don't belong to you. During the day, Alcatraz feels like history. Tourists moving through cell blocks, guides telling stories about escapes and infamous inmates, cameras flashing, voices echoing across concrete and steel. But after the last ferry leaves and the island goes quiet, the entire place changes into something colder, something that feels like it's still functioning under rules no one officially ended. My supervisor, a man named Collins who had worked island operations for years, didn't give me a full briefing. Just a few specific instructions that didn't sound like jokes the way he said them. He told me to avoid D block after midnight unless absolutely necessary, never respond to voices coming from empty cells, and if I heard screaming, to verify at once, and then walk away. I asked him why I would only verify it once, and he just looked at me for a few seconds before saying, "Because if it stops when you're standing there, it's not gone. It's listening." Then he handed me the keys and left on the last boat, like he was glad to not be there anymore. The first few nights were manageable. Routine checks, walking the cell blocks, monitoring the control room, dealing with the constant background noise of the building, metal expanding and contracting, distant water hitting the rock, wind moving through broken structures. But even then, there was something off about the place, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, like it's layered with something just beneath it. D block was the worst part, even before anything happened. The isolation cells, the narrow corridors, the way sound carried differently there, heavier, slower, like it didn't want to leave once it started. And every time I passed it, even during my early shifts, I felt watched in a way that didn't come from imagination. On my 6th night, just after 1:40 a.m., I heard it for the first time. A scream. Not distant. Not unclear. Close. Coming from D block. I froze in the control corridor, listening as it echoed once, then stopped completely, cutting off so suddenly it felt unnatural, like it had been interrupted instead of ending naturally. I checked the monitors immediately, switching to the cameras covering D block, expecting to see someone, anything that explained it, but the screen showed nothing, just empty corridors, closed cell doors, no movement anywhere. I should have followed Colin's advice and ignored it after that, but training overrides instinct sometimes, and I grabbed my flashlight and headed down toward D block to verify. The closer I got, the colder it felt, not just temperature but pressure, like the air itself was thicker, harder to move through, and by the time I reached the entrance, I could already feel something was wrong in a way that had nothing to do with noise. The lights inside flickered slightly as I stepped in, my flashlight beam cutting across the row of isolation cells, metal bars, concrete walls, everything exactly as it should be, except for one detail. Cell 14D was open. I stopped immediately. That cell was supposed to be locked. Secured. Not accessible during night hours. I checked it myself earlier in the shift. Now it stood open just enough to create a narrow gap of darkness inside. I moved closer, slowly, my boots echoing too loudly in the confined space, and as I reached the doorway, I felt it again, that pressure, stronger now, focused, like something inside that cell was aware of me standing there. I raised my flashlight and aimed it into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Then something shifted in the corner. Not fast. Slow. Like it was turning toward the light. And then a voice came from inside the cell, low, dry, and too close to be anywhere except right in front of me. "You're not supposed to open this one." I didn't remember opening anything, and that was the part that hit first, not the voice, not the movement, but the realization that something had already been done, and I didn't know when or how it happened. And I stood there, in the doorway of cell 14D, with my flashlight shaking slightly, trying to replay the last hour in my head, while the darkness inside that cell felt like it was pressing outward toward me. "You're not supposed to open this one," the voice repeated. Clearer now, and I could tell it wasn't echoing off the walls. It wasn't bouncing through the space. It was fixed, like it was coming from a specific point, just inside the cell, close enough that if I took one more step forward, I'd be standing directly in front of it. I didn't move. "I didn't open it," I said, the words coming out tighter than I expected, and for a second, there was silence again, that same unnatural silence that feels like it's waiting for the next part of something structured. Then I heard something shift inside the cell. Not footsteps. Something heavier. Like someone adjusting position after sitting still for a long time. My grip tightened on the flashlight, and I forced the beam further into the corner where the movement came from, and that's when I saw it. A shape. Not fully clear. Not solid. But enough to outline a person sitting against the wall, knees pulled slightly in, head angled down like it had been there long before I arrived. Then it lifted its head. Slowly. The face wasn't visible at first, just shadow where features should be, but I could feel its attention lock onto me the same way I'd felt it before in other places, that same pressure, that same awareness that didn't need eyes to see. "They don't open this one anymore," it said, and the tone wasn't angry, it wasn't even threatening, it was matter-of-fact in a way that made it worse, like it was stating a rule that had been broken. I stepped back instinctively, my shoulder brushing against the metal frame of the door, and the moment I did, something behind me moved. I turned quickly, swinging the flashlight out into the corridor, and for a split second I saw it. Another figure, standing at the far end of D block, just at the edge of the light, upright, still watching. Then, it stepped sideways into the darkness between the cells and disappeared. My chest tightened immediately. There was more than one. I turned back toward 14D, but the space inside felt different now, like the air had shifted while I wasn't looking, thicker, closer, and the shape in the corner had moved slightly closer to the doorway without making a sound. "You shouldn't stand there," it said, and this time there was something else in the voice, something sharper, something that felt like warning rather than observation. "Why?" I asked before I could stop myself. Silence. Then a breath. "Because they can see you now." The lights above me flickered hard, once, twice, then dimmed enough that my flashlight became the primary source of light again, and the moment that happened, I heard it from behind me. Footsteps. Not one set. Multiple. Moving into D block. Slow at first, then more organized, the rhythm building into something controlled, something intentional, and I turned fully this time, stepping away from the cell, pointing the flashlight down the corridor as the sound grew louder. The beam caught movement between the bars, shadows crossing the gaps between cells, figures passing from one side to the other, too many to track individually, all moving in the same direction. Toward me. "Close it," the voice from inside, 14D said suddenly, louder now, urgent in a way it hadn't been before. I hesitated for half a second, just long enough for the footsteps to get closer, for the shadows to stretch further into the light, and then I reached for the cell door and pulled. It didn't move. The metal felt wrong under my hand, colder than it should have been, heavier, like something was holding it from the inside. "Close it," the voice repeated, sharper now. The footsteps were right outside the cell. I could hear breathing now. Low. Multiple. Just beyond the doorway. I pulled harder on the door, my muscles straining as the hinge gave slightly, just enough to shift the position, but not enough to close. Then something inside the cell grabbed the edge from the other side. Cold. Solid. And it pulled with me. The door slammed shut with a loud metallic impact that echoed through the entire block. The footsteps stopped instantly. Complete silence. The pressure in the corridor dropped just enough for me to breathe again, and I stood there with my hand still on the door, heart racing, listening for anything else. Then, from inside the cell, the voice spoke, one last time, quieter now. "Don't open it again." I kept my hand on the door longer than necessary, because letting go felt like losing control of the only thing keeping whatever was inside contained. And for a few seconds I just stood there in D-block, listening to the silence settle back into place, trying to convince myself that what I had just experienced had ended with that door closing. Then the lights flickered again. Not briefly this time. Sustained. Dim. The kind of unstable lighting that makes shadows stretch in ways they shouldn't, and as the beam of my flashlight shifted slightly across the corridor, I realized something was still there. Not moving. Watching. The space just beyond the range of the light felt occupied again, the same way it had earlier, but closer now, more focused, like whatever had been approaching before, the door shut, hadn't actually left. I stepped back slowly from cell 14D, my boots echoing against the concrete, and the moment I did, I heard a single step match mine from somewhere in the corridor. Not behind me. Not in front. Beside. Keeping pace. I stopped. It stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was aware, like something was testing whether I understood the situation yet. I turned the flashlight toward the nearest cell. Empty. The next one. Empty. Then the third. Not empty. A figure stood inside, pressed close to the bars, face partially visible in the low light. Features indistinct but human enough to recognize, and it didn't move when the light hit it. Didn't react like something surprised, just stood there, already aware that I would look. "You closed it," it said, and its voice was different from the one in 14D, clearer, more stable, but colder in a way that felt intentional. I didn't answer. "You shouldn't have done that." It continued, and something shifted behind it in the darkness of the cell, another shape moving closer, then another, as if more than one was occupying the same space without needing room. My chest tightened again, and I took another step back, then another, but the presence beside me matched each movement perfectly, never entering the light, never showing itself, just staying aligned with me like it had attached itself to my position. "Open it," the voice from the cell said suddenly, sharper now. I shook my head immediately. "Open it," it repeated, louder, and the figure's face shifted slightly closer to the bars, the features becoming more defined, the eyes darker than they should have been. "No," I said, forcing the word out. The moment I did, the atmosphere in the corridor changed again. The lights flickered harder. The air dropped colder. and the thing beside me moved. Not in the view. Around me. Fast. For the first time since I'd entered D Block, something broke that controlled pace, and I felt it pass behind me in a rush of cold air that made my entire body react instantly. The cells around me weren't empty anymore. Every doorway I could see now had something inside it. Figures, standing, sitting, leaning against walls, all facing toward the corridor, all focused in the same direction. Toward cell 14D. Toward me. Then the voice from 14D spoke again. Not from inside the cell. From right behind me. "You didn't listen." I turned instantly, swinging the flashlight up, and for a split second, I saw it standing just outside the cell door, closer than it had been before, its outline clearer now, its shape more defined, like it had moved through the barrier instead of staying contained by it. My breath caught. The door behind it was still closed. Locked. And whatever had been inside was now standing in the corridor with me. The lights went out completely. Total darkness. And in that darkness, I heard something that made my entire body freeze in place. The sound of a cell door opening. The sound of that cell door opening in complete darkness didn't echo the way metal should. It felt like it passed through me instead of around me. And I stood there frozen with my flashlight dead in my hand, while the entire block seemed to hold its breath with me. Then something moved in front of me. Not fast. Not hidden. Just present. Close enough that I could feel the change in air where it stood, like space had been displaced by something that didn't belong in it. A breath came from directly ahead, dry and uneven, and then the same voice from cell 14D spoke again, but this time it wasn't warning me. It sounded certain. Now they can leave. My chest tightened immediately, because whatever had been contained wasn't the only thing in that block, and the moment it said that, the entire space reacted. Footsteps erupted around me. Not controlled. Not marching. Chaotic. Multiple directions. Cells opening. Metal clanging. Voices overlapping, some shouting, some whispering, some laughing in a way that didn't sound human anymore. I fumbled with my flashlight, hitting it against my palm until the beam flickered back to life, cutting through the darkness in a narrow line that revealed exactly what I didn't want to see. The cells were open. Not just 14D. All of them. Doors hanging ajar, shadows moving between them, figures stepping into the corridor from spaces that had been empty minutes ago, filling the block in a way that felt immediate and overwhelming. Some of them moved past me without reacting, brushing close enough that I felt the cold of them without contact. Others stopped briefly, turning their heads toward me with expressions that weren't fully visible but carried something heavy behind them. And the one from 14D stood directly in front of me. Fully visible now. Not solid. Not transparent. Something in between, like a shape trying to hold itself together. Its face still didn't sit right, features slightly off, eyes deeper than they should have been, mouth set in a way that didn't match the rest of it. "You let them see you," it said quietly. I shook my head immediately, backing up, my mind racing, trying to understand what had changed, what I had done wrong, but it stepped forward with me, matching my movement exactly, keeping the same distance no matter how far I tried to create space. "You opened it," it continued, and I realized in that moment that it didn't matter whether I physically opened the door or not. Something about my presence, my actions, had triggered whatever system existed there. The figures around us kept moving, filling the corridor, some heading toward the exit of D block, others stopping at different cells, interacting with spaces that no longer function the way they should have, and the sound of it all built into something overwhelming metal, voices, footsteps, all layered on top of each other, until it felt like the entire prison had come back to life at once. "You don't leave now," the figure said, and for the first time there was something in its voice that felt like finality. Not a threat. A statement. I turned and ran. I didn't think about protocol, about keys, about anything except distance, pushing through the corridor as the figures moved around me, some parting just enough to let me pass, others forcing me to shoulder through cold resistance that made my muscles tense with every step. The exit to D block felt farther than it should have been, the hallway stretching in a way that didn't match the layout I had walked dozens of times before, and the sounds followed me, not chasing exactly, but not staying behind either. I reached the door, grabbed it, and pulled hard, forcing it open as the noise behind me surged one last time, voices rising, metal clanging, footsteps accelerating, and for a split second, I thought something would grab me before I got through. Then I was out. The door slammed shut behind me on its own. Instantly, everything stopped. No sound. No movement. Just silence. The kind that feels empty again. I stood there in the corridor outside D block, breathing hard, my hands shaking, my flashlight beam unsteady as I stared at the closed door, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. For a few seconds. Then, from the other side of the door, one final sound came through. A single voice. Right up against the metal. "You're still inside." The moment I heard, "You're still inside," something in my brain shifted in a way that felt physical, like a line had been crossed without me moving. And I stood there staring at the D block door, trying to understand what that meant, because I was clearly outside. I had run out. I was standing in the corridor where I had always stood during my rounds, but the longer I looked at that door, the less certain the space around me felt. I turned slowly, raising the flashlight and scanning the corridor, expecting to see the normal layout, the long hallway, the access stairs, the control passage, but something was off in a way that didn't hit all at once. It came in pieces, details not aligning, distances slightly wrong, angles not matching what I remembered. The corridor looked the same, but it felt deeper, longer, like it extended further than it should have. I started walking, slow at first, my boots echoing against the concrete, the sound slightly delayed like it had more space to travel through, and with every step, the realization grew heavier. I wasn't where I thought I was anymore. I reached the turn that should have led back toward the main control area, but when I rounded it, I didn't see the control corridor. I saw more cells. Not D block exactly, but the same structure, the same layout, repeating in a way that didn't make sense. My chest tightened immediately. I turned back the way I came. The D block door was gone. In its place was another row of cells. All closed. All dark. The silence pressed in again, heavier this time, because now there was no reference point, no way to confirm where I was in the building, and that voice echoed back in my head. "You're still inside." I moved faster now, turning down another corridor, then another, each one leading to the same thing, cells, doors, repeating patterns that didn't change no matter which direction I took, and the more I moved, the more the air changed, colder, denser, like I was going deeper into something instead of moving through a structure. Then I heard it again. A door opening. Behind me. I stopped. Slowly turned. The corridor behind me was no longer empty. cell doors were open again. Figures stood inside them, just like before, but this time they didn't stay in place. One stepped out, then another, then more. Not rushing, not chasing, just moving into the corridor in a steady, controlled way that felt worse than chaos. And at the center of them, the one from 14D stepped forward again, clearer now than before, more defined, like it had gained something from being out. "You stayed," it said. I shook my head, backing away again, but there was nowhere to go. Every direction now, just another version of the same place, the same walls, the same cells, and the figures kept moving forward, filling the space between us slowly, but inevitably. "You opened it," it continued, and I realized then that this wasn't about the door anymore. It was about me being there at all, about responding, about engaging with whatever system was running underneath everything else. The pressure in the air built again, stronger than before, pushing against my chest, making it harder to breathe, and I felt something pull at my focus, like my thoughts were being narrowed down into something simpler, something more structured. Name. Unit. Assignment. The same pattern from before. I forced my eyes shut for a second, shaking my head hard enough to break that rhythm, and when I opened them again, I did the only thing that made any sense. I stopped moving. Completely. I didn't run. I didn't answer. I didn't react. I just stood there and refused to engage with anything they were doing. The figures kept approaching for a few seconds more, then slowed, then stopped. The one from 14D tilted its head slightly, studying me in a way that felt almost curious, and the pressure in the air shifted again, not increasing, not decreasing, just waiting. Seconds passed, then longer, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the space around me began to change. The walls adjusted. The depth shortened. The corridor realigned. And when I finally turned my head slightly to the side, I saw it. The real exit. The actual corridor leading back toward the control area. I didn't look back again. I walked straight toward it, steady, controlled, not reacting to the movement I could feel behind me, not acknowledging the presence that remained in the space I was leaving. When I reached the control room, everything was normal. Lights stable. Monitors showing empty blocks. No movement anywhere. Like nothing had happened. I stayed there until morning without leaving the room. When the first ferry arrived and staff came back to the island, I handed him my keys, without explanation. Collins didn't ask what happened. He just looked at me and said, "You went to D Block, didn't you?" I nodded. He sighed slightly. "Did you open it?" I hesitated for a second and said, "I don't think I did." He held my gaze for a moment, then shook his head once. "That's what they all say," he replied. "I left the island that day and never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and there's no reason for it, I still hear it. A door opening somewhere it shouldn't, and a voice reminding me of something I can't prove is true. You're still inside." If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to True Haunting Log so you never miss the next encounter. And if you've ever been somewhere that didn't feel like it to let you leave completely, send your story to truehauntinglog@gmail.com, because some places don't trap your body. They keep a part of you that never makes it out.